Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and welcome back to another live session with me on Rumination News Network channel. Thank you so much for joining. And today we are going to be looking at a very interesting topic as usual. We're going to be looking at Caribbean identity under threat. Is American influence taking over? That is what somebody has asked us to look at today, and we're going to look at that topic, and let's look at it very frankly. And we want to have an open discussion as far as that is concerned. Is the Caribbean losing its identity, or are we becoming an extension of America? Because when you look at our music, how we speak, what we watch, even how we define success, it's starting to look less Caribbean and more American. And this afternoon, I want to ask a serious question. Are we evolving or are we being absorbed? Very important discussion we are going to have this afternoon. And before we go any further, tell me in the chat, do you think the Caribbean identity is getting stronger, or do you think it's getting weaker? And I want you to be very honest with me. Do you think Caribbean culture or identity is getting stronger, or is it getting weaker? Please let me know in the chat what you think. Now, what do we mean also by Caribbean identity? We have to look at our food, right? Our music, right? Our way of thinking, because culture reflects the way of thinking of a people. And we're wondering every day as we look at the Caribbean region, are we losing who we are as a people? Or are we just identifying and connecting ourselves with the American culture? That is something that we need to understand and come closer to. Now, yesterday we were looking at the whole matter of militarism in the United States and how that could impact our lives here in the Caribbean. And there is a clipping here of a video which I saw yesterday as I, hung up, and I would like to share it with you just before you begin to give me your opinions regarding who we are and are we. Yes, good evening. Yes, good evening. Hi, and this is Annie. Yes, certain aspects of our identity are getting weaker. Yes, and that is definitely so. But before we even head into that, let me have you look at this video. Remember, I said yesterday that perhaps some of our people in the Caribbean could be drafted, could be conscripted into the American military because of the wars that the United States is facing. Now, I was just, scrolling through TikTok, and I learned where the Prime Minister of Jamaica, is officially seeking to start a Ministry of Defense. Think about it, that Jamaica is about to begin to start up a Ministry of Defense. I wanted to look at it. I thought that was so interesting in light of what we were talking about yesterday and what could happen in the future, in the near future. Let me see if I can share that with you right now. So share my screen and let's look at that. That was here on the TikTok video. And it's saying here, let me click on it, share, and it is here.
But if Jamaica have a Ministry of Defense, there is more chance to get drawn into international conflict. And now is not the time.
Let me see if I could begin, but restart. Okay, let us.
Andrew, stop. Prime Minister Holness, stop. In a real life. Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness announces the establishment of our Jamaican Ministry of Defense. Yo, dog, timing is everything, and no is not the right time. But if Jamaica have a Ministry of Defense, there is more chance to get drawn into international conflict. And now is not the time in a real life. Andrew, ease up. Because once that Ministry of Defense, them are going to say, here what, Jamaica, yeah man, them have a Ministry of Defense. Them can go to war. No, dog. Ease up, Andrew. Ease up in a real life.
Right. So that is interesting, isn't it? That we were talking about yesterday what impact that the war could have on the Caribbean. And here we're having now, and it's coming from the Daily Gleaner. So it means that it's official, that it is true. This is not just word of mouth or conspiracy theory, that the Prime Minister of Jamaica is about to, to create a Ministry of Defense, which suggests that he's getting instructions from the United States. Because what is happening is that very soon we are going to be likewise, not only American citizens, but Caribbean citizens, just like in World War II, might be conscripted to fight in the American military. So talk about the Caribbean now being plunged into a zone of war, where war was not our cup of tea, but we are now the United States, perhaps. I'm not saying that they're the ones behind Andrew Holness, but there's no other explanation why Mr. Holness would like to start up a Ministry of Defense, other than that he has been instructed to do so. Let us look at this. Thursday says, Maccabeus is saying, I thought the same thing about the conscription of our young people. Yes, that is what I think is going to happen. And I found it quite coincidental when I opened up TikTok this morning and saw this, that we were talking about this yesterday. And here is it now that the Gleaner is reporting that the Prime Minister of Jamaica is contemplating. And I can tell you that if Jamaica is going to do this, Trinidad and Barbados and Guyana and other Caribbean territories will follow suit. All right, so we have to watch what is happening and see how this is going to play out. Now I spoke to my nephew about it a couple weeks ago. Yes, we have to be very, very much aware of what is happening and to educate our people. Those of you who have children, you need to also make them aware of what is happening in the world and how this is going to impact their generation. Now is not the time to play around and just think that the life is going to be as we grew up, because it's not. This world now is a troubled world, and I don't think we're going to move backward. We're moving forward, and forward here means that we'll have a lot of wars. And he's saying, I thought Jamaica already had a Ministry of Defense. I think Trinidad has one. Well, they have they have a military, but I don't think we've ever had a Ministry of Defense, because it's almost similar to what the United States Ministry of Defense, Ministry of War, right? I don't think that is what we have, okay? Because we really are not, I don't think that we have ever thought of investing huge sums of money as America does into a Ministry of Defense, right? We have a military that we say who would probably be able to defend us. How well they will be able to defend us, we don't know. But we don't have the money in the first place to invest in ministries of defense. Yes, TNT does have one. Well, they might have one, and I'm hearing Trinidad also having a Ministry of, what do you call it now, Homeland Security. When I heard that first during the buildup of war with Venezuela, I am sure that is coming exactly out of the United States playbook, right? The Ministry of Homeland Security, because even the United States didn't have a Ministry of Homeland Security until 2003 or thereabout, when they are 2005, I think. When it came into existence. So all of these things are a play out of what is going to happen in the Caribbean as we move into the vein of this Americanization of our culture. So even in the military vein, the military aspect, we can see where our citizens are now becoming as the US citizens would think. And some of us, even last night, were suggesting that the price of oil and gas will go up because of the wars, and some of us don't mind that the price of gas and oil will go up, and we think that will benefit our economy, and because of that we think that it's okay for people to die, right? That is something that perhaps was unheard of maybe years ago. We would not think like that, because we know that every war results in the loss of lives of many people. Right? So we can't just look at the economics, we have to look at the social aspect of wars. Okay, so let us look at, we were asking the question, do you think Caribbean identity is getting stronger or weaker? And let us look carefully at what we mean by stronger or weaker. In what aspects? Let us find out what we mean by Caribbean culture. And there's a very interesting clip here I also took from TikTok of a lady here who was, let me see if I lost it, who was explaining to us what being Caribbean means. Let me see if I can get her again. Okay.
Yeah, there is a big difference
let me,
between how
where is
Caribbean
she?
people identify and how.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, there is a big difference between how Caribbean.
Okay, let me get it and share this with you. So she's explaining what it means to be Caribbean, all right? Because some of us, we have lost. What does it mean to be Caribbean anymore? We don't even know, again, what it means to be Caribbean citizens. We are now saying that we're black or white, or, you know, we are racializing, as it were, our identities as the United States citizens do, right? Which makes us we're moving away from who we used to be. Where am I with the you know, I can't find what I was trying to put up here. Okay, let me see if I could share that with you. Oh, where is it? I thought I had it here, but let me see if I have, where is it now? How can I get it? I'm probably having difficulty going to put it up. But, you know, let me see if I could. I can't. It doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to share that with you, which I wanted to, because it's a very interesting situation that he is presenting to us. Maybe you have to just listen to the audio, because if I can't, then I can't. Let me see if I could try again. Doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to do that. So let me know if you can. Yeah, it's not coming. It's not coming. Okay. All right. Let me see if you can listen to it. Okay. Tell me if you can hear what she's saying. I'm going to just see if I can play it, and let me hear if you can. I'm not able to. Oh Lord.
Expect us to identify. So yeah, there is a big difference between how Caribbean people identify and how some Black Americans expect us to identify. So let me just explain it. In the Caribbean, our history doesn't start with the British or with America. Our story starts with the Spaniards. They are the original colonizers of Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Jamaica, and Cuba, long before the United States even existed. So when the Spaniards arrived, they didn't meet empty lands. They met warriors. Unfortunately, the Spaniards also brought one thing that nobody could fight: disease. Now, here's where people get confused. Caribbean slavery started early, 1500s early. The plantations, the sugar mills, the coffee farms, they were already running long before the British turned the transatlantic slave trade into an industrial system. And the conditions here were way more brutal. The average enslaved African on the Caribbean sugar plantation lived only about 5 years. That's how extreme the labor, the heat, the violence were in the islands. Over centuries, that created something unique, a blend of Taino, African, and Spanish identity, all shaped inside a totally different system than the one here in the US. Our identity comes from a different history, a different timeline, and a different culture. So we could just keep it simple. Respect the difference and drop your island flag below if you feel what I'm saying.
All right.
Yeah, there is a big difference.
All right. Did you hear what she said in terms of our differences, in terms of that we can't, you know, plunge ourselves into a box like American culture where you have the black and white. I think that our culture is much more nuanced than just be saying that we have some black and white people here and you're black, right? Because I remember when I was studying in the United States and living there, and people just said you're black, and that didn't mean anything to me. Blackness or whiteness or whatever does not mean anything to me, right? What means something to me is your nationality and what culture that you are actually linked up with. Right. And that is one of the reasons why you find that many Americans don't have a real identity, because of this colorization and suggesting that you are tied up with the color of your skin. That cannot be so. Humans cannot just be the color of skin. Right. That is a part of us. Don't get me wrong, but that should not be the sum total of who we are. Because when you say you're black or you're white, what are you suggesting? Who are you? Okay, because you have white people, you have black people in all parts of the Americas because of the history, right? So let's look at some of the USA is reshaping the Caribbean as part of its own defense shield they wish us to soften. Absolutely. And they're telling us that the area belongs to them, the Americas belong to them. So therefore, they have to also secure us militarily. They want to control us militarily. So we must be on their side in helping to secure. Right? This is in tandem with what Marco Rubio is suggesting, that here in the Caribbean and the entire Western Hemisphere belongs to the United States. So we are just some outposts of the U.S. empire. David is saying weaker, so weak we can't define with any consistency what Caribbean is. Why? Why is it that we can't define who we are and what our identity is? Is it because, as I'm suggesting, that we are defining ourselves now as black and whites and Indians, and we're not looking at ourselves as Caribbean people? Because once we were the maybe example, we are not perfect. Don't get me wrong. We are not perfect in terms of our different nation states, but we were an example of how different groups of people could live in one landmass and live like human beings. Right? The United States is not the example or the paragon of virtue in terms of people living together civilly in a way that suggests that they are sophisticated and civilized. Right? We tend to think that the United States is a civilized country, but that racial aspect of it, as W.E.B. Du Bois has often said, has stained the United States culture, right? And has not allowed them to live in a unified manner. The only thing that protects the United States citizens away from being a place like South Africa is the Constitution, right? Is the Constitution. That's it. And the fact that they try, even now they're moving away from that, they used to try to enforce the principles outlined in the US Constitution. Apart from that, outside of that, that is not any example that should be set for any country to live in, and as far as living together in a unified manner. Now we have here, they deal with external security, territorial waters, airspace of the nation, which includes the regiment. Yes, we're saying that every country for the most part, and it has a sort of way of defending itself. Most countries do. What we're suggesting now is that this is going to be called the Department of Defense. I've never heard of any ministries calling the Department of Defense in which the budget will have to be also earmarked for that department. Remember now that in the United States, that is what people are complaining about, that you have huge sums of money going into the Department of Defense, which they're now calling the Department of War, more than they invest in education, in healthcare, and other critical ministries that would help Americans to survive and to thrive. So if we are now going to have an official Ministry of Defense where we have to allocate budget, we have to put budget and money into, it means therefore that we are going to be further denied of some of the basic things that we need, like healthcare, and also education, etc., etc. So do we really need now to have a Ministry of Defense at this critical moment? But we should not be surprised, as the presenter suggested, that now in a time where the United States is waging wars around the world, saying that the Western nation belongs to them, wanting the Chinese to get out and other global powers, we should not be surprised that the United States requires for all Caribbean territories perhaps to formalize their ministries of defense, which will make them become a police state, essentially. Because everything that they talk about right now in terms of foreign policy has to do with what? Security, national security. And if that is the case, if we are going to make our culture just a police state, then who are we really as a people? Did we grow up like that? Did we grow up in a police state, or do we want to have a free state? We can't have both, I can tell you that. And that is what the United States citizens have to learn. You can't have an empire and a republic, or a democracy, as some people call it. You've got to have either or. So we have to make up our minds. Do we want to live in a police state, or do we want to live in a free society? That is what we have. There's no middle ground here, as far as if you read history, no middle ground at all. I can see persecution for the Caribbean people on the horizon. Yes. And when you look at what Sean Sobers was saying in Trinidad about being able to surveil those people who are going to go to England to see if they have any criminal records, and everybody will be surveilled, you can see where that is going. And we're not here suggesting, Annie and other people, that we should not have something, government should not ensure that citizens are protected. But to what extent? And governments are also involved in criminality. All right, so they can't point fingers at us because they too are not righteous. So we don't want them to pretend as if we are the guilty ones, and they should set up systems that they're able to track and trace the criminals. But obviously, we're living in a world now where the criminals are the ones who get away, like the Epsteins and lots of other criminals that we have, including within our governments. Okay, why do you think the United States did not want to publish the Epstein files? Because they know that lots of the government officials are also as guilty as Epstein was. And many of them are even more guilty than Epstein was when he was alive. So we have here the aforementioned are the things the Ministry of Defense in Trinidad also responsible for. Yeah, and they will tell you too in the United States that they're responsible for whatever and they're protecting American citizens, but are they doing that when they deprive them of education, deprive them of health care? How is that going to help them in the longer run? How is that going to secure America and secure the liberties of people there? So we have to look at the agenda, the big picture of what we're seeing now happening in the world. It's not just that what they're doing is wrong, We're not saying that they're wrong to have something or a ministry that perhaps seeks to protect citizens. What we're looking at is a context in which they are doing the sort of environment. The infrastructure that we have nowadays is one in which we were seeing the government every day around the world curtailing our freedoms and under the rubric of national security. So there's no difference between what you hear in the United States, the narrative there, and the narrative that is here. Good evening, Marie, to the professor and my Caribbean family. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining. Right? So we are not suggesting here, we have to contextualize everything. It's not that we're saying that we should not have a ministry that seeks to defend citizens or an army. Nothing is wrong with that. But when we hear now at a critical point in which we're hearing that the Caribbean need to join the United States in the war on drugs and the war on gangs, we have to be careful here that we too are not going to be policed as the citizens in the United States. So we're going to have the Patriot Act, and you criminalize all your citizens under the name of national security, that they're protecting us from criminals. But who are the criminals? This is a question that we need to ask ourselves all the time. Now, let's go back in terms of our music. Did anybody see the video on TikTok or on YouTube of Shaggy? Right? Shaggy is a popular Jamaican artist, international dancehall, reggae artist, whatever, rubric he falls under. And did you see the shirt that he was wearing? And there are lots of controversy surrounding what he was wearing. And so, let me see something. I thought JA already had one. My bad. Well, I'm saying they might have. We do have a military, but I can't recall that anybody in the Caribbean has a Ministry of Defense. I didn't know that we had one, but I know that Trinidad had an army, Jamaica has an army, but I don't know if we had officialized it under the rubric of national defense. Right? We have national security, so we have the Ministry of National Security for domestic. Right, for domestic, to protect citizens domestically. Yes, so yes, that we do have a Ministry of National Security, not a Ministry of Defense. So is that what you call Ministry of Defense in Trinidad? Ministry of National Security? Is that what you call? But where did the Trinidadians get the whole matter of Ministry of Homeland Security? Where did that come from? Did that come from Trinidad, or is that coming from the United States itself? Okay, that is something we have to look at. Now, though Caribbean colonial history is different, our problem is media. Via media, African Americans' lifestyle has become a template for the entire African diaspora. We follow them and lose ourselves, and you are correct. And that is through the music and through entertainment generally, and through the education system too, right? You go to any US college right now, and all they talk about is this black and white, black and white, black and white. And we're not suggesting that some of what they teach there at these universities might not be relevant. They are certainly relevant and should also be able to help us to understand more about ourselves and our realities in the Caribbean. But for the most part, there is this emphasis, overemphasis, and this obsession with race that sometimes we forget who we are. Because a color does not define who you are, cannot. All right? It's religion, your economics, your food, your music, all of these things, the way of life of a people, that is what is going to define you. So you can find that a white person might go to the Caribbean or might live in a predominantly Black American environment and behaves like the group, right? Because that person is a part of the group. Let us say, look at lots of Americans when they come to the Caribbean, right? And they see other white people. They see Chinese, they see Indians, they see Jews, and they see all different ethnic groups in the Caribbean. They are alarmed because they think we're just this one, a monolith that we have in the Caribbean, that we are not as diverse as the United States is. And as the young lady spoke on the TikTok video, our history started long before the history of the United States. So we are the ones who should be teaching them how to live together. Yes, we have our faults, we have divisions amongst ourselves, but we can teach them a lot. That to be Trinidadian means that you're going to speak the same way, you're going to have the same food, right? And there's no distinctiveness in terms of how an Afro-Trinidadian or an Indo-Trinidadian or a white Trinidadian or Jewish Trinidadian is going to behave. I mean, of course, it depends on their education, economics. You can talk about class, or we can talk about that and the class divisions there, right? But generally speaking, they eat the same food. They behave the same way. They behave like Trinis. In the United States, there is a distinctive way of how whites behave and how blacks behave because of the years of segregation that was imposed in that country, all right? In the Caribbean, and to some extent Latin America, we weren't a part of that history, all right? Our history is much more nuanced, and we need to remember our history. So somebody who is Jewish and Indian and perhaps have a little European in their blood cannot just say holistically in the Caribbean that you're black. And that is what Caribbean people have been saying. You go to the Dominican Republic and people say, oh, they're all blacks. But is that true? When you look at their DNA, it's not that simple. Black according to whom? And who is black? How do we define black? How do we define whiteness? In fact, there is a British scientist who went to the United States, and he was particularly located in the South. And he was talking about the fact that a lot of the people in the South in the United States, excuse me, in the United States of America, excuse me, in the South, that many of them actually have black genes. 90% of it, over 90%, he said, had black DNA. So many people, particularly in the South, many white people, what we think are whites in the South, have black blood, but they call themselves whites. So, and vice versa. Over 75% of African Americans have white DNA, European DNA. So how do we now say that we are holistically that or holistically this? We've got to be careful, and this is how culture is more complex than we really discuss it every time. David is saying this is a simplified view, but there is more to it. Okay, let's hear to my simplified view. Yes. So we have, yeah. So we need to now look at the Caribbean, and we need to say to ourselves, who are we? Are we first Indian or Africans, or are we not by our nationality or culture? So you're Trinidadian, Barbadian, you're Jamaican. What do we really want to describe ourselves as? Because right now we are following what others are doing, and we're finding ourselves going down a very dangerous precipice. And if we're not careful, very soon we're going to have race and ethnic wars in the Caribbean, as we see in the United States of America. Right? Because we are so indoctrinated and we like to follow everything that comes out of US, we do it. And we do it uncritically. And right now, the entire education system is built on what is West from what is, other parts of the world. But one of the things, as I said, the West too, we are a part of the West, right? We can't now deny that a part of us is Western. The other day I was watching a YouTube video of a Jamaican young miss, Jamaican young lady, who is married to a person, her husband from Ghana, right? And when they were asked, both of them, what's the difference? Is Ghana similar to Jamaican culture or whatever? They're saying there are many similarities and there are likewise many, many differences, right? And the person from Ghana said when he went to Jamaica, he saw many similarities with Ghana, but he also saw many of the influences of Western culture on Jamaica. And the same thing he could say about Barbados, about Trinidad, about any of the Caribbean country. So we cannot deny, even though sometimes we don't like some of what we read about our family history, we can't deny the fact that a part in our DNA that we have Western cultural tendencies. We also have African cultural tendencies, and we should shine both of them. The best, we should want to exemplify the best of both worlds and not deny who we are by saying that we're just Africans or we're just Europeans or we're just Indians. Okay, we cannot deny who we are. I was even watching another video in which there was a history of Indians in the Caribbean, right, in Guyana, in Trinidad and other countries. And there in that documentary, it was saying that Indian people in the Caribbean are at a loss because if they go back to India, they're not going to be claimed there, right? Indians don't regard them as a part of their cultural heritage because they're Caribbean, right? And in the Caribbean, sometimes, maybe we don't, sometimes when we have our racial wars and so forth, or ethnic conflicts, we tend to say you don't belong here. So where do they belong? And that's the conflict that we find ourselves. You find that also in the diaspora, the West Indian diaspora in the United States. In the United States, there was another Trinidadian girl who was talking this morning, and she was saying that when she is in New York, she doesn't consider herself to be, well, Americans don't consider her to be Americans because she's eating all Trinidadian food. She is immersed in Trinidadian culture. And when she goes home to Trinidad, she does not feel Trini, right? So this is the sort of paradox that we find ourselves in. But who are we? And what her final answer was, she feels accepted because her family, her Trinidadian family, accepts her and loves her, and she doesn't care what other people want to think about her. Right? So that's what we need to understand, that we define who we are. People should not be able to impose on you what they want to say about you, but you are who you are. No, I just Googled it, and it says the Ministry of Defense is distinct from the Ministry of National Security, but Wayne Sturge controls both, okay? It states that two ministries work alongside each other. Well, that's interesting. Now, how did they get that? When did the Ministry of Defense, when was it founded? Can you find out that for us, Annie? Was it a recent creation as the Ministry of Homeland Security in Trinidad? But for Jamaicans, I don't know if we've had a Ministry of Defense. We've only had, over the years, to my knowledge, we've only had Ministry of National Security. I've never heard them. I know we have a military, which is just there as a sort of symbolic gesture. I've never, most of the times they fight for other people, but the fact is that I've never heard of in Jamaica Ministry of Defense, but maybe Trinidad has one. I would like you to find out, Annie, when was it created? Was it there from the British left in 1962, or was it a recent creation in Trinidad? Okay. Yeah, I would like to know that, because I've never heard of that. And one of the things is that's why it's kicking up a lot of controversy in Jamaica, is because we've never heard about a Ministry of Defense in Jamaica. But we're looking at these creations right now in light of what is happening globally. Remember now that we cannot separate what we're seeing in the geopolitical realm with what is happening domestically. Yeah, it says here, and he's saying it seems very recent. Absolutely. This is recent. But I know Stuart Young, so it was formed under the PNM, right? So this might be recent, could be probably 5-6 years ago, right? So Trinidad, and because, for example, Jamaica does not have a Ministry of Homeland Security, but Trinidad does. I was shocked when I was reading last year and they were saying the Ministry of Homeland Security. I said, what? Trinidad has a Ministry of Homeland Security? Okay, so yes, I'm not denying that. So Trinidad already has a Ministry of Defense. What about Barbados? Anybody online from Barbados or any part of Guyana, Dominica, Antigua, any of the Caribbean countries? Can you tell me if you also have a Ministry of Defense in your country? Now, why do we need a Ministry of Defense at this juncture of our history? Is it going to help us? Let me know in the chat. Do you think a Ministry of Defense is going to be working in our favor, in our interest, or in the interest of the United States and other global powers? What do you think? Do you think a Ministry of Defense is going to help us at this stage of our history, or is it that it's going to be used as a tool for the United States to defend, as it says, its hemisphere? In Barbados, no, we do not have a Ministry of Defense. Yeah, I'd never heard of that before. But Trinidad does, as Annie's saying. The Ministry of Homeland Security is the Ministry of National Security. Oh, but did they call it? Okay, so they changed the name from the Ministry of National Security, because was this always the case? Because the United States did not have a Ministry of Homeland Security rather in years ago, right before 2003. It just didn't have this Ministry of Defense. So it would be interesting, Annie, to see whether or not, when was that name changed, or has it always been from Trinidad became independent, a Ministry of National Homeland Security? It sounds plausible. Maybe it is, because it's Homeland, and the name was changed recently. Absolutely. All right. So we see the trend. And that's what I'm saying to you guys. It's the trend that we're looking at. The context is not that we're trying to attack our governments, right? We're not here to attack them. That's not the purpose of this program, right? To go and light up the home addresses of our prime ministers, because they're representing us, right? Whether we like it or not, they are our representatives. But we have to question some things and look contextually really what is happening. Why now? Why change the Ministry of National Security to the Ministry of Homeland Security? Why do we need now a Ministry of Defense? We're not saying that it should not be had. We're not saying that it's not going to be beneficial, or it might not be beneficial to us. But why? And who benefits? Who will benefit from the creation of such a ministry? These are the questions we need to ask. All right? It's not that I'm saying that I'm Andrew Holness or Mrs. Kamala Person Bissessor or Miss Mia Motley or demons, and they're trying to take away our rights. But we're looking at what is happening in the United States. We're seeing President Trump trying to, make up of a police state or police states the entire region, right? And it's something that we have to be concerned about. Okay, because I think what has happened to us is, ladies and gentlemen, that we live in a relatively peaceful zone and where we have freedom, and we don't understand what police state means. We really don't understand what, when we say a police state, we don't understand what it means, and we don't understand how it is going to affect us. But if you read what happened during Nazi Germany, or what happened even in Trujillo's Santo Domingo, that is in the Dominican Republic, you understand what surveillance is and how this can impact our freedoms. And don't think that because they're smiling with you now and you're living relatively peaceful lives, you don't have to live what is happening in Iran and other parts of the world in, Yemen and other things. We're not living that life yet. But if we continue on this trajectory, we are going to have to experience what these people are experiencing. So that's why we have to speak out. Because if we remain silent at when they begin now to implement these things fully, it will be too late, and we just have to put up with what they are going to impose upon us. Right? Make sure you're liking the video and you're also sending the live out so that people can join and we can have, because these discussions are very, very important right now that we have in the Caribbean. We're having too many gossips and other things happening, and we're not dealing with these pertinent issues that we need to address. Now, let's be honest. Are we still Caribbean, or are we becoming American with an accent? What do you think? You think we are still Caribbean, or do you think we are now becoming American? I see young people on TikTok and on YouTube and some of the social media, and when you hear them speak, it's very difficult to decipher if they're Caribbean or they are Americans, because the radio, the internet, all of these avenues and outlets, they are hearing predominantly the TV shows, the movies, right? They're hearing predominantly American accent. So we are even losing our distinctive accents across the Caribbean, where people are now sounding more American than they are Caribbean. So do you think we are losing, and how can we arrest and begin now to get back our culture, reclaim our heritage and culture? How do you think we can do that? Because we don't control the internet, right? We control the powers that be control America and other forces, or the powers control the region. So how do we reclaim our Caribbean culture, as it were? What is Caribbean culture? What is Caribbean culture? Let us begin with that question. What do we mean when we say we're Caribbean? We're West Indians. What is it? Anybody? What do we mean when we say that we are Caribbean, we're West Indians? Yeah, let me get this off. Yeah. What do we mean when we say we're Caribbean? Anybody can say? I'm not hearing anybody from anybody. Okay. While you're putting your answers together, let's continue to on board with the discussion. Now, when we look at the music that we have in the Caribbean, okay, we have soca, we have reggae, we have reggaeton, we have all different types of music, right? In the Caribbean, do you think that they sound Caribbean, or do you think that that too is also being, what should I say? It's there is a lot of synchronization and syncretism with our music. Do you think that our music is being diluted and it does not reflect or sound exactly like what we used to have? So we have TNT's age-old Ministry of National Security was split into two after the last general election. Wow. So it's after the last general election that it was split. A Ministry of Defense and a Ministry of Homeland Security. Do you hear that? Do you see that? And thank you very much, David. TNT's age-old Ministry of National Security was split into two after the last general election, a Ministry of Defense and a Ministry of Homeland Security, and that was under Mrs. Kamala predecessor, because he said that after the last general election, which would have been the election of Mrs. Kamala predecessor, and we know that she's on Trump's side. We know that she says she's 100% in agreement with what President Trump is doing around the world. This is what Mrs. Kamala predecessor is saying. So yes, we can see that she would be in agreement with that sort of change. But did Trinidadians know about it? Why didn't Trinidadians know about it, or did they just go along with it? Is it now that we're finding out, or did Trinidadians understand that this was a recent change? That's the question that we need to ask. In some cities, we have a common culture, but in other cases, we are very different. Yes, so you're saying that in some, yes, we are in the Caribbean, we have a similar culture in terms of our West Indianness or West Indian identity, in terms of the history of slavery, right? And sometimes we share the same food too. The only thing, we prepare the foods differently, right? Using different herbs and spices and all of that stuff. Okay, but so we can say that we have lots of similarities, but we also have lots of differences, and nothing is wrong with that, because that's how we are. That's why we're distinct, and we want to be distinctive as much as possible. When I see a Trini, I know it's a Trini. When I see a Barbadian, I want to know. I don't want to know that there is a dilution of Jamaican and Dominican or whatever. But even if that person is and shares all that cultures, nothing is wrong with that too. So if my mother is Dominican and my father is Trini, and I want to embrace both, nothing is wrong with that. And that is how human beings are able to adapt. We are adaptable to cultures, right? So if I want to embrace, because my parents share, a number of cultures, 2 or more, right? And family members, nothing is absolutely wrong with that. But we should be able to recognize that this is who we are as a people, in terms of our food, our dress, our speech, our religion, all of these, our social, our worldview. How do we view the world? Do we see the world through a black and white lens? Or do we think the world is more nuanced than being black and white? When you speak to the typical African American, everything is black or white, Sometimes you talk to them about a very simple problem. Oh, because you're black. And sometimes it might be true, but a lot of times it's not. It's more nuanced. It's much more, complex than the race card will tell you. All right. But that's what we are doing the same thing right now in the Caribbean. I remember in Jamaica, was it last year, when we were going for elections? And there is Mark Golding, who is of Jewish descent in Jamaica, right? And he's a white man, he's going to betray us. He's not Jamaican. The man was born in Jamaica, lived in Jamaica all his life. Yes, his father was British, but his mother was half Jamaican, and I think she and of another heritage. But the fact of the matter is that he grew up there in Jamaica, right? And he identifies as Jamaican, but Jamaica was playing the race card, right? That he's not black, and as a result of that, he should not be representing the country, right? Now, what does have to do with his color, right? What does it? We should, and I said it on many videos, I said we should be looking at the man from his competence. Does he have the competence to govern the country? That's another question now. People can attack that, right? But you can't attack a person's color, because we know that in the Caribbean, we've had different shades of people, from white to black, right? So when did we now begin to talk about whiteness and blackness being that important? I find Jamaicans are the most different from the other islands, because most of the other islands follow Trinidadian culture in terms of the music, festivals, and foods. And you might be right. And you know why you're right? Because I think most of the islands are on the other side of the, the map. So you have the Grenadians being close to Trinidadians, and the Barbadians, and and the Dominicans and stuff like that. Jamaica is on the other side with with the Dominican Republic and Cuba. So we are in fact different. Yeah, by our geography, right? Geographically speaking, we are different, right, than what you'd find in many of the different islands. Even from our accent to many of our demeanor, yes, we're different. And I agree with Annie. David is saying, I don't hear people boasting about being Caribbean. They won't know what it means after the emasculation of the pride conjured by the West Indians cricket teams of the 1970s and 1980s. Right. We no longer are speaking about those things, David. And I think that you do have some of our writers and literature being studied, but I think that we can do more. We can do more to assess our Caribbean identity. For example, it was Professor Hinson who was on the program, on the show some times ago, and he was saying that there in Guyana, when he went back, because he's Guyanese American, so when he, as a scholar, he was a professor at the University of California, and he says upon returning, I think he did some teaching at the University of Guyana, and he said that his students, a lot of them did not hear about Walter Rodney. They had no clue who Walter Rodney was, and he is one of the most renowned Guyanese scholar in the world. Right? Everybody knows Walter Rodney. If you go to the United States, they know him. They know about him, right? Because of his revolutionary ideas. One of the most brilliant Caribbean scholars that we've produced. Like he's in the league of the C.L.R. James and the one who wrote about capitalism and slavery, the prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago. That was Eric Williams, right? He's in that league. And the guy, he says his Guyanese student, and they were university students, never heard of the man. Okay, so we are in trouble. We are in serious trouble. I must say too, talk about Guyana, many Jamaicans don't know a lot about Marcus Garvey. I must say I didn't until I went to the United States. I really did not know the magnitude of the man and what he did. Okay, we only know that he was a national hero, and that's where it stops, right? And the Rastafarians there glorify him as a prophet or whatever they think he was or is. Okay, but for the most part, we are not doing enough to educate ourselves about Africa, right? We also lack understanding of Africa, a whole deal, and ourselves, who we are as a people. Right? And the different islands, the different West Indian countries. Also, I did not know a lot. Until I went to the United States also, I did not know half of the Caribbean and how we behave and who we are until I went to the United States, and I was forced to be among Trinidadians and Barbadians and all of us. And we had to communicate, and we had our potluck, and we studied together, and we got to know more about each other. When we're living in our respective islands, we just live there, and we're just happy to be Trinidadians and Jamaicans and Barbadians. But a lot of times we don't know a lot about who each other is, or distinctive cultural dynamics. We don't know. And our education system needs to do more to do that, to inform us. And he's saying, I remember when I was a small child and I went down the yard to play, and I heard someone said Walter died in a bomb blast. I did not know who he was. Right. And it was until I went to the United States that I knew who Walter Rodney was. And Walter Rodney lived in Jamaica for some years. Right. So these are things that we need to know, we should have known. But we were more, talking about, British history and romanticizing who the British were and all of that stuff, while not studying about our heritage. Okay. I learned more about Haiti also in the United States. In the Caribbean, we often don't talk a lot about Haiti and the importance of Haiti in the region. Okay, we tend to just respond to Haiti based on what we see on the media. So as David says, much of our education and in terms of how we see ourselves is through what the media tell us. And obviously we cannot also excuse our education system, which has, for the most part, indoctrinated us into a belief system that we are not as important and that we should, think about going to America and everything is American and everything is England or, Canadian or whatever. So we're always thinking outward. We're never thinking inward. And that is what we need to do. We need more of thinking inward. Who are we? And we have produced some very, very great and powerful intellectuals and scholars. And when you go to the United States and to Great Britain and other countries, in Canada also, you can see how many Caribbean intellectuals have shaped the intellectual landscape in these countries. And we should be learning about these people too and know who they are. Okay? But we tend to think that we are not as important because we are so minute, we're so small, and nobody regards us as, any superpower. We don't have any great armies, right, and stuff like that. But there are other things that we have that people could learn from, and I'm suggesting, or racial harmony. Even though we have problems, but we still do to some extent. We're not at South Africa level where they would be, segregation, or in the United States when they had segregation. We are still, to some extent, don't get me wrong, I think Jamaica, for example, to some extent is a segregated society, right? But it's not legal, even though it is covert, but at least it's not from the government and you can't go someplace or you can't go here or there. But I think to a great extent, Jamaica is a segregated country. So there are lots that we have to learn about ourselves, and we have flaws, and we ought to see how much we can. Now, why we can improve on those flaws? Now, why is it that we like to compare ourselves with each other? Why is it that we are always fighting amongst ourselves? What is causing that? When I publish the videos, talk about Jamaica, don't talk about what is happening in Trinidad or in Barbados or in Guyana. Let's talk about your country. But can we speak like that? When Marcus Garvey was alive, when C.L.R. James, when Eric Williams were alive, these great scholars, were they just talking about their country, or were they global in their analysis of the world? Obviously, they were global, right? They were global. And that is what we have to do. If we are educated, we can't just talk about what is happening in our inner circle. We have to think global. And that is what we are here on this platform trying to do. A lot of us don't know who Kwame Tor and Henry Sylvester Williams are. That is true. A lot of us don't know that these people were very important in the civil rights movement in the United States. And I hear a lot of African Americans saying that, we built the foundation, we laid the foundation, and you West Indians and Africans came and you are benefiting. And we're not saying that African Americans, they did a whole lot of work, right? And we have to be appreciative of what they did. But we were also, maybe not in the numbers as they are, because they were born there. But the fact is, a lot of us from the Caribbean and Latin America, and to some extent Africa, were involved in that struggle. And of course, Kwame from Trinidad and these people were very much a part of the civil rights movement. And many African Americans probably don't even realize that Kwame was Trinidadian, right? Then we have the great Pan-Africanists, right? They were great Pan-Africanists, right? The Kwames and the C.L.R. James. How many people in Trinidad talked about C.L.R. James, a very important scholar in the Western Hemisphere, right? A man that mastered the English language like nobody else. And the guy there that wrote the book there, what is the great Trinidadian literati, what's his name? The Castle, not the Castle, not that's from Barbados. The A House for Mr. Biswas, right? He wrote A House for Mr. Biswas, Naipaul, right? Naipaul, right? These people, we need to go back and we need to study these people and how these people, reformed the world. I understand that V.S. Naipaul is compared with Shakespeare. Can you imagine that somebody coming out of the Caribbean from Trinidad and Tobago, right, is compared with the likes of Shakespeare in terms of the caliber of his work. So we are not, any, fly by whatever come people, right? We're great people. And if we only would unite around what is good or the strong qualities that we share, the Caribbean would be a powerhouse. When we think about Cuba, when we think about Haiti, right, and all of us coming together, I can't say the Dominican Republic because they are a different culture. They really are Americanized in many ways, right? So, I'm sorry. But if we were to educate them in terms of helping them to understand who they are, right, then they would also join us and would be a powerful force to reckon with. Henry Sylvester brought Marcus Garvey into Pan-African movement, right? Absolutely. And these are the things that we need to study, that people just did not come up because of their own wisdom. They had people who were their role model likewise, right? And from whom they learned. Okay? So I'm sure that to some extent, Eric Williams would have learned from, from Sarah James, right? Because I think Sarah James was once his teacher too in Trinidad, if I'm not wrong. So the fact of the matter is that, yes, Annie, we need to study about these great Caribbean scholars. And I think that that's one of the things that Trinidad gave to us, a lot of great intellectuals, right? And so some of us, and this is where we now need to look at. Some of us might have shone in great areas like intellect, Barbados, and their intellectual culture too, right? Trinidad, Jamaica might have shone most in entertainment, sports, culture. But we need to see where we can learn from each other to improve on our lot in life and improve, the Caribbean identity in the world. Because when I was at Howard University, right, it was interesting to note that outside of Africans and West Indians, that many of them would not have it to go to graduate school. We are the ones who filled up graduate school, West Indians and Africans. And when it was time for graduation and the names are being called, right, you could hear the African sounding names and the names from the Caribbean, right, filling up the seats, right, because we know who we are. And we know that, yeah, you're trying to put me down and say I'm black or whatever you think I am, but I know who I am. And I'm able to, to ride the storms or to ride through any darts that you may hurl at me. Now we have, yes, the Vidya Naipaul, right? Oh, his name was Vidya. Yes, I was saying V.S. Naipaul. Well, V.S. Naipaul, V.S. is his shortened word, but his name is Vidya. Okay, he got right. He did get a Nobel Prize for Literature. Yes, he did. Then we have David Maynard is saying, what I learned most from Walter Rodney was how development in Africa was only from plantation to port. I see the same pattern even today in the Caribbean. Development only when businesses set up, right? And when they set up, right, it's not development for the people, it's development for the minority, right? Because first of all, whenever they develop, things get far more expensive, profits go into the hands of the few, and the masses get poorer and poorer. Look at Guyana, right? Guyana has a growth rate, per annum of, they say, double digits, right? And yet still the country is facing severe economic crisis by the majority of its citizens. So we have to question what they mean by development and who controls our resources, and are our resources being used in the improvement of our people? And that the answer we know. I think we know the answer to that. It is no. It's not being used in our best interest, right? So something that we need to look at and we need to explore. Now, let's look at our food. How do you think we have shunned the world in terms of our food? And in recent times, I must say, we tend to be so nationalistic with our food that every day I'm seeing on TikTok who has the best, curry goat or goat curry and all of that thing. Do you think that's what we should be doing? Nothing is wrong, don't get me wrong now in saying that according to my opinion, Ghana has the best, or Trinidad has the best curry goat or whatever it's called. But are we getting astray by that in terms of, we do know that curry, which is people associated with Indian, sort of culture, so Trinidad and Guyana, both countries have a very high Indian population, right? That they would definitely have maybe the best curry, right? But why do we try to compete so much in terms of who has the best curry goat, or who has the best whatever it is, whatever dish it is? Why are we missing the point here? Are we missing the point? And what if we come together and say, this is how Trinidadians do their curry, and this is how Guyanese do their curry, this is how Barbadians, etc., 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 and we learn from each other, and because each culture is going to have its own taste, right, and their own taste buds. So what Trinidadians might find to be delicious might not be what Guyanese and etc., etc. All right, so because food is subjective, right, and people's taste buds are subjective also, right? So I think we need now to come and just to say that these are our foods, and we have been impacted by so many different cultures, right? By the Indian culture, by European culture, by African culture, by all of the cultures, Syrian cultures, interwoven together, and this is who we are as a people. We have great foods, we have great intellectuals, but now I'm hearing more, if you will, people telling us who has the best KFC. So we're moving now from our own local produce, and it's a big energy into who has the best KFC. Why? Why is KFC a big topic in the Caribbean? And KFC, what it does, it gives you diabetes, right? There's nothing special about KFC, right? Why is KFC so important? Is it because, as we're saying, another aspect of our becoming Americanized, where even our foods, or the perception of food, we want to be Americans. If we're not having the hamburger, we're not having Burger King, we're not having all of the pizzas and the whatever, it means therefore that we are not sophisticated. Right? People associate people who have money with the American foods that they eat, right? Which is not even, well, some of our foods are not healthy too, but it's better than eating KFC, right? And McDonald's. Well, we find ourselves now, even in our food and lifestyle. Talk about lifestyle. Are we moving? Or are we just driving and sitting home and watching TV and becoming hot potatoes? That's who we are. Another thing is a problem right in the Caribbean. So obesity is also growing in the Caribbean, because even our lifestyle is mirroring that of the United States of America. And it says here, our independent governments kept things intact for their colonial and neocolonial masters by banning revolutionary intellectualism. Yeah, and people had to leave. They literally forced people to leave, because they didn't want them to challenge the system, right? So many of them went to North America, went to Canada, and around the world, because they couldn't stay in the Caribbean, because the government would not allow them. That is why Walter Rodney was banned from Jamaica, because he had too much influence over intellectuals in Jamaica and even on the working class, right? So the government of Jamaica at the time banned him from entering the country. Can you imagine that? That you're coming back from a conference. So Walter Rodney went to a conference, right? And then got to the airport in Jamaica. He was returning back to his teaching job at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. And when he went to the airport, they said, no, you're not welcome here. Can you imagine how disappointed he was? And remember now, I'm now 48, right? He was a young man at the time. He could have been in his early 30s. Think about you're being a young intellectual and you're returning to your country, to the country that adopted you and had you as a professor there, and the country says to you, you can't come in, right? It must have been disappointed for him. He must have been really, really upset to know that another Caribbean country would have treated him that way, and a very important man that he was. But at that time, they didn't regard him as, he didn't have the name. A lot of times, unfortunately, after we die, that people begin to appreciate the work that we do while we were alive. Philly Yardy is saying KFC been a big topic since the 70s, if not before that, because KFC in Jamaica is not the same as in the States. Right, but it was there, but I didn't see people running for it as I'm seeing. Did you see, Philly, last year in Jamaica, they had a special one day at KFC across the island, right? And the Jamaicans were behaving as if they've never had fried chicken before. It was horrible. The images that came out on Facebook and YouTube and social media was just like an uncivilized people running lines long, and they were fighting just to get a special at a KFC. What is KFC? When I was in Jamaica, people ate KFC, but they weren't so obsessed with it. But I'm seeing an obsession not only in Jamaica, but not that Trinidadians behave that way too, but I see a lot of people from Trinidad also saying which KFC is the best, and they're getting all hyped about which KFC is the best. Is it from Barbados? Is it from Jamaica? Is it from Trinidad? Is it from Guyana? Right? And what does it matter? These are the childish things that we're doing now. And I think that we have meatier, more substantive matters that we need to talk about, rather than who has the best KFC or who has the best ackee and saltfish. Right? We don't need to talk about that right now. Those things are just should not be on our conversation at the moment. We have other things that need to be spoken about. How can we come together as a region to stop what is happening? Right now, Mr. Pereira sent me this today in my WhatsApp, an article suggesting that Russia was trying to send humanitarian aid to Cuba, and they were blocked. Can you imagine? Oil and humanitarian aid, and the U.S. blocked them from sending aid to Cuba. These are things that we must talk about, because it's almost like it's another Gaza in the Caribbean. And by the way, I want to do a live on that with Mr. Pereira on Sunday. Hopefully he will consent, and to compare what is happening in Gaza to what is happening in Haiti and in Cuba, because that should be of concern to us. Would we have a famine? Because that's what the Cubans probably are enduring right now. They might die of starvation. Philly saying Rasta and Bob Marley actually got acceptance overseas before in Jamaica. Rasta was demonized by the system and Christians. And I like the point you're making here, Philly, because a lot of times people are accepted when they leave the islands. Why? Why is it that when we or intellectuals or philosophers or great minds in the Caribbean, why is it that we don't acknowledge them? Why is it that we reject them? We think that we belittle them. We dehumanize them until they go to England or Canada or to one of these great countries, or what we call first world countries, before we recognize them. And he's right. Until Bob Marley was recognized overseas, nobody saw him. But I want to ask though, Philly, do you think Bob Marley is over-recognized? Do you think it's because he belonged to a certain family that they were able to put him on because some people argue that like Garnet Silk and other musicians in Jamaica were superior or produced superior music to Bob Marley, yet still they were not put on the global scene. When you think about the Grammys in the United States, most of them go towards the Marley family, right? So is there a trend here? Or what are we seeing? Are they telling us who we should regard as our heroes, or musical heroes, or political heroes, or whatever heroes? And if these people are not recognized by Donald Trump or by Joseph Biden or whomever, then we don't recognize them. And that's slave-like. That's a problem we have in the Caribbean here. We have to acknowledge it. And thank you for bringing that point, Philip. We consume this news, political language, and sense of world from the U.S. Unfortunately, absolutely everything we take from them, from the news to culture, and to music, everything is, and to foods, we're also taking from them. It was only a couple weeks worth. It's gonna come to a head. Yes, we're stuck. Yeah, we are. And he's saying Jamaicans are the only people who prepare ackee and saltfish, but the other Caribbean islands, yeah, I was just using it as I don't mean that other Caribbean islands do. Yeah, we're the only ones who do eat ackee as a fruit, as a food. But I was just saying, just to say, but it was not that I meant that Trinidadians cook ackee. Jamaicans are the only people who prepare ackee and saltfish in that other Caribbean islands. We just let the ackee fall because it is considered poisonous, right? We know, I think you all know by now that it's not poisonous. It's only when you force it open, right? If it doesn't open naturally, then it is poisonous, right? It has to be opened naturally, right? Then it's not poisonous. So Akis will love ackee, and I know what you're saying, Annie. I was just talking to talk. But whether it's curry goat or it is curry chicken, we tend to be so much competitive. And nothing is wrong with competition. Is that sometimes it gets toxic. I read some of the comments, and we're all getting toxic and hyped about, who cares, who has the best curry. If you love your curry and you're from Guyana, more power to you. You think it's the best, more power to you. From Trini, more power to you. But we have meatier stuff now to talk about rather than who has the best KFC or who has the best Burger King, right? This is not what we should be talking about at the moment, okay? Because we have some very dangerous things happening in the world, might I say. Okay, so what are we going to do now in terms of reclaiming our heritage? What are some of the ways we can do? What are some of the strategies we can take to reclaim our heritage, our culture, which is, again, being stolen away, being taken away from us? Well, I think that I can't say that it is being taken away from us deliberately. I think in some extent we are also guilty of allowing it to be extracted, to be appropriated. I think we are. All right. So we tend to sometimes listen to music that, the people on the airwaves promote. Right. For example, look at Tessan Chin from Jamaica. Right. She produces clean music. Do we find ourselves, I know Trinidad doesn't love Tessan Chin and so on, but Jamaicans, they like her too, but do they support her music as they support another DJ who might be on the world stage and the world has, sort of, endorsed? Will they support her music when other clean lyricists begin to sing good quality West Indian music? Do we support them? A lot of times we don't. So that is why we are where we are now. So we are guilty too, don't get me wrong. No, Bob Marley was a messenger. He went through the struggles. Remember, he almost was unalive, yes, with help of the CIA. His kids are a different story. They are riding his coattail, and you're correct, I think. But what do you think? Do you think, reasonably speaking, Philly, that of all these years that Bob Marley has died, that there hasn't been another singer that came up which could challenge him? Should we be stuck with one guy that is international in terms? It's just like, well, maybe that's the case, because like you say in Bolt, he is a case by, he's a league by himself. So yeah, he's the fastest man, and maybe nobody will come to challenge him for years to come. So maybe Bob Marley, in that field, in the musical realm, is like that of a Usain Bolt, perhaps, don't know. Now, we have here, they should invest more in Jamaica, give back. Who should? Who do you think should invest more in Jamaica? The diaspora or the musicians? Right, how do we reclaim, ladies and gentlemen, how do we reclaim our Caribbean heritage? How are we going to reclaim that which belongs to us? Because we can see that there are forces that are trying to destroy what we here in the Caribbean have. Oh, the Marleys. Okay, the Marleys. Okay, the Marleys. I say the Marleys are trying to destroy his legacy, and they should give back to Jamaica. Yeah, I think the Marleys have been bought. And remember too that Jamaica was not so much nice as you said to Bob Marley. They were not nice to him, and I think that the family members know that. I'm not saying they should not give back to Jamaica, but I understand that if the wife, Rita Marley, had not fought for the restoration of Bob's legacy, because Bob did not leave a will, that the Jamaican government, it's possible that the Jamaican government, along with foreign entities, could have stolen their birthright. Yeah, it is a fact. So Jamaica did not really treat Bob Marley well, even when he was alive, and even after he had died. Right? They were not particularly nice to the family because they were in a league. And for those of you who don't know, Rastafarianism in Jamaica was not an accepted, and still is not, but it's much more accepted than it was in those early days. So the classism that existed in Jamaica was so strong that people were against Rastafarianism. And Bob Marley was a guy who smoked his spliff and all that stuff. I remember when Sydney Breakspear, the former Miss Jamaica World, was with him. It was a big stink. That particular of members of her class who was wondering, what are you doing with that dirty Rasta man? Okay, so the fact is that it was not until Bob Marley, as we can see, emerged as this superstar on the global scene that the prime ministers and these people in Jamaica, the middle class, the upper echelon of society, started to accept him, right? So it all has to do with money. It doesn't have to do with the fact that they accept him for who he was or for who he is. They accepted him, or they have accepted him, because of his monetary and global status. And this is what happened. The same thing is happening with Usain Bolt, right? He too had to understand when he lost his money the other day. You know what he said? He said that people don't understand that in Jamaica, he was saying that people only realize you for your money. And even if you have made money, he is realizing that you are still not a part of their class. So even though Usain Bolt is popular, he is recognizing that he is still not and will never be accepted in Jamaican social, the higher social classes there in Jamaica. He will not be, despite his global accomplishments, because it's what it is. And how do we get, because that's also a problem that is setting back the Caribbean, or classism, depending on your education, on your economics, on your social status, the house you live in, the parents to whom you're born. All of those things play a very dominant role in how we see each other, in how we view each other. How are we going to change that culture? Because that has to be changed, if we're going to move forward. Give Americans their credit. They don't care about where you come from, is what you've achieved, right? Give the United States its credit. It's not where you're coming from, but it's where you are going. To some extent in the Caribbean, yes, they give you a little leeway, but if we look carefully at the system, you cannot move beyond what they think, or, who dare you? You're coming from that family. Who dare? You're not going to pass. You're not going to pass beyond this gate, right? And that is how we're gatekeepers in the Caribbean. And that is something also that is holding back our culture. The Rastafarian movement was started in Ethiopia, and they were accepted there. That is why they see Ethiopia as their homeland and Haile Selassie as their emperor. I don't know if the Rastafarian movement was started in Ethiopia, though, Annie. I think it was started in Jamaica. Where did you get that from, that it was started in Ethiopia? Their religion, their ideology was built around Ethiopia, saying that Haile Selassie was the god, right, that would come to free Black people. But I don't know if Rastafarian movement came out of Jamaica, right? That came out of Jamaica. We can, but we lack unity. Yes, we lack. But how do we get unity? How do we unify ourselves? because we keep on saying we lack unity, but how do we unify ourselves? How do we come together as a people? How do you think that's going to happen? Through education? Is it going to happen through going to University of the West Indies, through going to Harvard University, Howard University? How are we going to unify our people? How can we? Marcus Garvey made perhaps one of the greatest unifiers, didn't accomplish it. And he's one of the greatest mass movements in the history of Black people. Reclaim our heritage by first knowing what it is, setting up a true UE. Absolutely, that's where we have to begin at UE, because they have lost their way, cutting out cable, internet, and foreign content, and burning libraries, reducing competing ideologies, and focusing inward. Now, what do you mean by burning libraries? Why do we burn libraries? I think we should be building libraries. Why do we burn libraries? Am I reading your thing right? DAGM? Why would you burn libraries? Shouldn't we be building libraries? And by the way, I believe that we should have contending ideologies in terms of books to read, right? So we might not agree with what a book proposes or is teaching, but we should be introduced to all different types of doctrines and knowledge. And then we can discuss all and decide what are the ones that we would like to embrace, right? But we want freedom in the Caribbean countries for people to read whatever they think they like to read, right? Because we can't impose on people, but we have to have some shared values that I think we are now losing because of our dependence on North American culture and this sort of, individualism, right? Because with materialism came this individualism where we think we can do it by ourselves. We can do it on our own. So we hear from Trinidad, some of the people are on Mrs. Kamala Persson-Bissessor's side. Oh, leave her alone. She can take care of Trinidad. Okay, but it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Or leave Andrew Holness alone. He can take care of Jamaica. It doesn't work like that, because that's why we created CARICOM, because we understand that we were not able to maneuver in this very hostile, economic and social landscape, political landscape. So we said, let's come together as a group, form a bloc to stand up to countries which are many more times bigger than we are. Yes, we have, libraries. I saw a section in a library targeting young adults to accept certain sex. Oh, yes. I see what you're saying. Sexual orientations or libraries are 99% foreign values at all. And you're right. And one of the things is that they're making this is not that they could not have books and, and it's in the library. So if you want to go and read it, that's up to you. But they are sort of promoting these lifestyles now. They're making these lifestyles front and center of education. And that is where we have to draw the line. Okay, not that the people can't be exposed and they can't leave these books and stuff like that, but don't make them front and center of what education ought or ought not to be. When did sexuality become the front and center of education, formal education? And I'm not saying that we can't have discussions about these things, because we need to have some form of sexual conversations in the Caribbean. I think we grew up dark, if you will, right? Where we think sex and all of these things are something that are taboo subjects. And then when we need to deal with these things, we don't know how to deal with them. And that's why we have teenage pregnancies, women who don't know how to deal with men who don't know how to deal with women. So we need to know about our bodies, our different sexes, and how we, sort of behave as, as sexual beings, because we are also sexual beings, right? So we need that, but we don't need to overemphasize who should be what and who is wearing what title and identity and who is what sexually. I don't need to know that, right? But if we just have a general knowledge of sex, of our bodies, and how we are made up as men and women, because I don't know what they're teaching about man can become a woman and woman become a man, because that is not biological. But for those people who want to, we could have debates, because that is what is important too. So we can have debates where children in high school can study biology and other forms of studies, philosophy, and debate with those people who think that they can straddle whatever gender that they would like to straddle, from being a man to a woman or a woman to a man. Is that possible? So yes, we need these debates, and we need to have open conversations about these counter lifestyles, these countercultural lifestyles, and see how we are they good for us or are they bad for us? Let us look at what is happening in the United States. Is that good for them? It's not. We can see where our young people in the United States are not learning the math that they should be learning for the most part, are not learning the English and the languages that they should be learning, because they're overemphasizing the sexual sort of studies. So I agree with you. That's DAGM. Philly's saying, what did Singapore do that we cannot do? First, the system of government has to change. We have to wheel and come again. The current system will not cut it. Yeah, I think we need to. I think our system of education is rote, and we just know how to memorize. Don't get me wrong now, it helps us when we go to North America, right? And we are able to do courses because we have a strong culture built on rote learning, right? But we need to also, like North America, to some extent, focus on more the doing aspect and not just the theoretical aspect of our education. We have a lot in terms of theory, but we don't know how to, for example, I see many economists in the Caribbean, and they're great at telling you about economic theories. Excellent, right? And they can talk about graphs and how this graph is operating, if you put it in a model, an economic model. But can they run an economy? Do they understand the needs of a basic economy? They don't. They have absolutely no idea. Outside of the book, they can't. They can't inform the Minister of Finance what viable, practical solutions he could take to improve the economy of Trinidad or the economy of Jamaica or Barbados. They don't. Everything is rooted and grounded in theory. And I've always been saying that for a long time, that the Caribbean needs to get out of that theoretical mindset and begin to look at how they can transition from being theoretical to practical. And you watch the United States, for example, and when their students go out when they're studying business, for example, and they have to go out on their internships and all of that stuff and learn the craft. So when they get into the world of work, they can function, right? We are not doing that in the Caribbean. We love to focus on theory, right? And we're not helping our country when we do that. And most people can't think outside of the box. When you're just in the theorist, you can't think outside of the box. So that is why they're not able to look at what is happening in the economy and say, hey, Minister of Finance, this is what you can do and the economy will improve. They can't do it. But they're professors, right? And they've graduated from some of the leading institutions of the world, including the University of the West Indies. But they cannot, for the life of themselves, they cannot save an ailing economy in our region. I look at the DR, for example. The DR does not have a lot of, the universities, they don't even have a PhD here in the DR, right? They don't have PhDs here, right? They go abroad and they get their PhDs. But the fact is that they have the fastest growing economy in the Caribbean. Why is it that UWI, that is in Trinidad and in Jamaica and Barbados, why can't we produce economists where we should be the distinguished ones? If you look at the education of the Caribbean in comparison to what the DR has, the Dominican Republic, then we should be the leading economists, but we are not. We have more PhDs perhaps, And we have been to more prestigious universities, some of us, right? But our societies are alien, right? So what is this education about? How is it empowering us? How is it changing our societies? And that is something that we have. Are we also becoming Americanized in our understanding of education? Education in the Caribbean is synonymous with, what are you going to do with studying Spanish? What are you going to do with studying history? Oh, you're not going to make any money. So is education just about getting a job and making money? Or is it about empowering the mind? These are questions that we have to ask. And in the United States, education is much more marketed, right? So what are you going to do after school? Are you become a pharmacist, a lawyer, a doctor? How much are you going to make? And that is what determines what you should study, not what you are called to do, and not what you would be of some, would help you to revolutionize, as it were, the society in which we live, right? And that is what we are finding now. We are now likewise becoming, education is tied to money. So right now, even to go to UE now, it's very expensive to study law, to study medicine. It's a lot of money. And because it's all tied to marketing and, and the market. David is, no, not David, but DAGM is saying, Andrew, what do you think about competing ideologies? We have various foreign scholarships, then meet on a local board. You become chairman, your ideas prevail. It all goes to waste when I take over. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Stephen King is saying here, giving us so-called independence and financial independence is two different things. Absolutely. They don't want us to prosper like that. Right. But we are the ones too who should be saying that, holding our governments to the fire and letting them know that what they're doing is not helping us. But I think we're so much contented with having a phone, because we're on the phone 24 hours a day. And we are entertained, we are titivated. They have titivated us that we just don't care anymore, right? Once we are entertained with our laptops and we have our internet and we can eat some food and we can go to parties and we can have our carnivals, we are fine, right? And then the government says, okay, well, let's entertain them and do what we want to do. And that's exactly what they're doing, right? And I think it was Annie the other day when you said to me, Annie, why are you talking about Trinidad and Carnival? I talk about Jamaican Carnival too. I talk about the endless partying in Jamaica. That we're caught. In fact, there are many videos, not from me, but from on TikTok, saying, how does Jamaica, with so many poor people, how do they party every day? Where do they get money from every day? Jamaica, poor country, to party. Because that's the only way the government can help them to soothe their economic pain, by partying, while the government is running roughshod over the people. So I don't only talk about Trinidad. In fact, I never talked about Trinidad and Carnival before. I just spoke about it this year because I said, in light of what took place in Venezuela, I think that it was now time to do some very introspective look, to take an introspective look at what really happened. Because Trinidad and Tobago, you missed a bullet. That could have been a bullet that could have cost that build-up of Nicolas Maduro. Thankfully, Trinidad is not near Iran, right? Thankfully, that is not like, Trinidad. But if Trinidad was like geographically located near Iran, I don't see how they would have dodged the bullet, right? So this is how we have to think now, and we have to reflect. Oh, sorry. This is what I saw before. Giving us so-called, yes, I read this already. I deal with a lot of, Annie saying, a lot of people from the DR, and many of them never got past elementary school. Yeah, it's a very sad thing here in the DR. But they have a better economy than most of us, right? Is it that they focus more on skills training, and we are focusing on getting degrees, and the degrees mean nothing in terms of the prosperity of our economies? I'm not talking Trinidad here now, but I'm talking perhaps more Jamaica and some of the other economies. But Jamaica, for example, which boasts some of the best educated. I mean, not as many as Trinidad, but we do have some very brilliant people, and they can't seem to even run a foul coop, right? They can't even manage a foul coop. And they're doctors, and they went to, Princeton University, and they've been to Cornell and all these outstanding universities, and they can't run a small economy the size of Jamaica that Jamaica has, right? So it tells something is wrong. Something is fundamentally wrong with our schooling. Stephen King is saying, yeah, we're too Americanized. We have lost our culture. We've lost our culture. Yeah, because there's a time too when teachers were respected in our society, right? Now it is, I don't know who is respected now. The entertainers, Vibes Cartel, right? Vibes Cartel and Beanie Mans and the Shabarans are the ones who are the role models. The what's his name? Shaggy, right? And all of the other, and we're not saying that these people are, not to be recognized. I'm not saying that. They have, shone in their own field. But why are we overemphasizing sports, right, and entertainment, and not the scientists coming out of Trinidad, or the scientists coming out of, they're not getting the monies and the recognition that the Beanie Mans and the entertainers get, and the sports people get, right? Where are we going with that sort of, can we build that sort of culture? Where somebody, because they can run well and they train. So what about the doctor who trains, and the nurse and the lawyer, the teacher who goes through training, whomever studies? Why don't they get the recognition? I remember when Jordan Maxwell of Jamaica went to the Scripps Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C., and she was the first Black person to have won that competition. And Jamaica, yes, gave her some, whatever, they welcomed her back to Jamaica, and they, praised her, but not to the extent that they would praise the athletes, right? Not to the extent. So are we, how are we actually encouraging, motivating, inspiring our young people to do well when we don't encourage them to study and to pursue intellectual development, right? This is the quandary that we face, the Caribbean is facing. Everything is tied to money. And if you can become a prominent basketball player or a Usain Bolt, then that is what is great. And you can ride around and have enough gal, right? And do whatever you want to do, right? So this is where we are now as a Caribbean people. Everything is linked to economics, and nothing is wrong with building economically, but there is a too much obsession with entertainment and not with critical thinking. We have here Annie saying, it was not I who told you that. Told me what? It was somebody else that told me that. Why am I speaking about Trinidad? Yes, somebody told me, why are you talking about Trinidad? I would love to hear you talk about Jamaica Carnival when it comes. Yeah, I do talk about these things, and I've been saying that from day one, that the Caribbean, particularly Jamaica, parties too much. It's too much partying that's going on. Every day is a party, and I'm not saying anything is wrong with having a downtime and going to parties. Nothing is wrong with that. Okay, if you want to party, you party, but we can't have this constant partying every day. What are we building? What are we discussing? Years ago, when in the time of the CLR James and these people, they would have firewall conversations. They didn't have all these TVs and social media, so they would gather on the streets. I understand that Eric Williams, when he returned from Howard University as a professor to Trinidad to be prime minister there, politician, that he had the university with the street university, where the people would gather around him and he would teach them history, right? That is what it's about. We're not saying that people can't enjoy themselves, but we are overemphasizing entertainment as we see in the United States. And we have to change that culture, because we're not going to be empowered as a people, as a region. We can't. Look at the number of people are here talking, having these discussions. They would, if I were talking about a gossip, or something, you'd see lots of people here because they're willing to hear what's happening to Rihanna, or what is happening to the one from Trinidad. What's her name again? Yeah, all of these people, right? That's what they want to hear. That is what makes them tick, right? Talking about what is ahead and the serious, times in which we live. People don't want to hear that. What are you talking nonsense? You're talking nonsense, right? And when things now begin to fall and to collapse, they're the first one to cry. They didn't know. They know what? You saw the waymarks, you saw the signs, but you decided that you did not want to listen, you did not want to participate in any conversation, you want to enjoy yourself until you can't enjoy yourself anymore. Look at the Iranians. I mean, as much as they heard and they knew that Trump was threatening them, do you think that they would have ever thought that they would be in the situation that they're in right now? Okay? It's a nightmare. And we can find ourselves, we see what is happening in Cuba, and the fact that irrespective of their economic model, that they're people. And Trump has no right to be, hindering, what do you call it now, humanitarian aid going to the people, right? If he wants to help them, you have to get them what they need. They need oil, they need gas to be able to survive. Why allow them? Why allow them to starve? Why allow them to suffer because you want to impose your economic model or your way of doing things upon them, right? And it's happening in Cuba today, but it can happen in Jamaica tomorrow. It can happen in Trinidad tomorrow. It can happen in Barbados next day, next week, next month, next year. Anything can change. We can get a new leader, and they're opposing Washington, and Washington treats us the same way that they're treating Cuba at the moment. So these are things that we need to look at. We need to come together. We need now to get more serious. We need to educate ourselves too. We need to read serious books about our history, the history of the United States. And we cannot live in a vacuum where we think that everything Trinidadian is our world perspective, or the world perspective, or everything Jamaican is the world perspective, or Barbados, or whatever. It doesn't work like that. We're too small. First of all, we're too small to think so viscerally, right? We have to think outside the region, and be able to look at the region and make connections with what is happening globally. We are not in charge of ourselves, and I've been saying that from day one. We're not in charge. Our leaders are not in charge. Okay? And the moment we understand that, we will wake up and we will watch closely what they're doing, and we will keep them on their P's and their Q's. Right? Because look at the whole situation with this Ministry of Defense. And, Annie was suggesting that it was recently formed in Trinidad. Quietly, covertly, without the populace knowing. Right? Now, at least the Jamaican government is telling the people that he's going to do it. Right? He's not giving them any choice to. They don't have a choice in what he does. Yet still they're saying that they are living in a democracy. They choose their government. Andrew Holness is the legitimate de facto prime minister of Jamaica. And he never told them that let us vote and see if the nation wants another ministry. A ministry of, in fact, we have too many ministries, and they're just not functioning, to be frank. And to have another bureaucratic ministry, the likes of Ministry of Defense, is something that is going to be terrible for Jamaica and the Caribbean, because they are going to be, diverting funds from basic things like healthcare and education into national security, all for the United States, not in the best interest of Jamaicans or Trinidadians or Barbadians or Guyanese, right? And this is what we're talking about. Make sure you're sharing the live, you're liking it, because so we have about 11 minutes left. Let us say what you're saying now. We can wrap up and we can head into our weekend. I'm hoping that we can have a live on Sunday. I'm not sure because I don't see a lot of people here today, but we want to look at with Mr. Pereiro the whole matter of Gaza and the likelihood, if this is not controlled, what Trump is doing in Cuba, that this could turn into another Gaza. Right? What I don't understand, and you probably can help me to understand, why is that Trump is so obsessed with this leader in Cuba, that is Miguel Diaz-Canel, who is the president of Cuba, but he's okay with the Cuban regime. It's weird. They were always suggesting that the Castro regime was a terrible regime, was the enemy of the United States, but now it's no longer the enemy. Miguel is the person that he wants out, yet he is comfortable with the Cuban, the Castro regime in Cuba. The same thing happened in Venezuela. It doesn't make any sense. So the only logic here is that the United States always wants to preserve a perceived enemy so that it can launch a war. Outside of that, what happened in Venezuela and what is now happening in Cuba, and I just see what happens, how this Iranian war will end up, right, does not make any sense. It doesn't. Right? So it makes us beg, we have to ask the question, where are we going with these wars? Are these wars being fought on our behalf, or are they being fought to defend the interests of billionaires, right, who also want to see us unalived? They don't want us around because we are parasites. They are the parasites, really, but they think we are the parasites because they have to feed us, they have to clothe us, they have to house us, and they want everything. They want all the resources for them and their respective families. That is what the wars are about. Nothing more, nothing less. And we in the Caribbean are now caught up in that sort of maelstrom, in that sort of global conflict, that at this moment we can be drafted. We are going to have to create ministries of defense, plow lots of our money that we don't have. We have to borrow money perhaps from the United States to put into their defense department, to fight their wars, to buy their military equipment, right? At the loss, I should say, of our people. We must decide whether or not we are going to put up with what we're seeing, or we're just going to move along and have our carnivals, have our parties, and continue to live empty lives. All right. Any other comments before we leave? I think that this was a very interesting live, and is something that we have to think about, because I think you're right. I think that we have lost our way. We've lost our Caribbean heritage to a great extent. And unfortunately, we are under new colonial masters, and they are the United States leaders, political and cultural and economic leaders. So any other comment before we leave? 7 more minutes before we go and rest. Make sure you share the live, and hopefully we can come back. Tomorrow I'll also be posting a video on the Vatican and the US-Cuba relations. Make sure you watch that. I'll post that around about 1 o'clock tomorrow. So make sure you get there tomorrow 1 p.m. and you watch that video and see and comment. Send me your comments and let me know what you think about that sort of relation, because there are lots of things happening behind the scenes that we have to know about and study, so that we can understand, we can make sense out of the nonsense that is happening in the global geopolitical environment. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you will like the video and you will send it to as many people and put it up on your platform, on your social media platform, wherever you are, so that people can watch it, and will force the algorithm to share and to distribute the videos to as wide an audience as possible. Any questions before we go? Any further comment? I don't see any other comment. Oh, we have some comments. Wow, I'm sorry. I didn't see these. Talking about competing ideologies, it's keeping Caribbean advancement in stasis. Yeah, you're correct. I am not sure what you're talking about. I was talking about the carnival. I think the DR gets over 5 million tourists. More, they get 11 million. Was last year, right? They get a lot of tourists. Don't worry about the DR. They are better off without the neocolonial education system. You're correct, because that is why they're doing better. Focus inward. What school did Socrates and Plato go? They just thought deeply without, yeah, you're correct. The Kardashians, distractions, absolutely. A lot of these degree holding individuals today are keeping up the status. Yes, they do not have our best interest at heart, and you're correct. And Phil is saying, let us be the change. Absolutely, we have to be the change, not the government, and that's what we need to understand. You said something about me telling you to talk about. Yeah, I was saying that maybe it could be another person, Annie. Maybe I'm sorry if I'm mixing up you with. Yeah, Nicki Minaj was the person I was talking about. A lot of people are in La La Land, right? They don't want to deal with reality. Absolutely. And Philly's saying Marco Rubio dead set on bringing back colonialism and the United States in general. You know, part of the problem is when we have when they gave us 24-hour TV from North America, and these leaders are nothing but supervisors. They are leading, they're not leading anything. You're correct. They're managing us, as you're saying, Stephen. Too big of a government under this administration in finances already limited. Yeah, he believes in cutting off the head and leaving the tail. If you remove the regime, it would be chaos. Remember, people support the regime more than that. Could be an explanation. You're correct. Stephen is saying, if you listen to some of the rhetoric coming out of Israel, you would think we are fighting on Israel's behalf. Correct. You're right. And that's the deception that they're having us. We don't know. They don't want us to know the real enemy. Phil is saying he's trying to do what he did in Venezuela. He admits he was trying the same thing in Iran, right? That would be stupid if he's trying the same thing in Iran, because Iran is a bigger country with more Muslims and people who be willing to fight. He wants someone that he can control. That's America for you. America wants to dominate. And thanks for the great program. Thank you too, and thank you for the attention and your participation. And let us try to have, if we can have at least 3 lives per week, so we can keep the momentum going, and maybe more people will join in the future. All right. So let us say, what do we want to talk about on Sunday? Do you want me to talk about Cuba and the Gaza thing, or you have a special topical interest that you would want me to address on Sunday on another live? What do you think I should address on Sunday? I was thinking about, is the Caribbean, is Cuba or Cuba and Haiti the Gaza of the Caribbean? That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of inviting Mr. Pereira to talk more on that. I would love that too. Okay, good. So let's keep this on Sunday, and hopefully Mr. Pereira will be able to join us on Sunday, right? On Sunday, where we can explicate more on that matter. All right. So see you on Sunday. Have a great weekend. And I hope that we can meet again on Sunday. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Please go out if you don't see it on your feed, because YouTube is not sending the thing in your feed. Just click on my channel and you'll see a new video at 1 p.m. tomorrow. Haiti is worse than God. You're correct. So that's what we want. In fact, if we could even have this the lady from Dr. Pear, if Dr. Pear can join us too on Sunday, I don't know if she probably will accept this last what do you call it now, last minute invitation, but maybe she will. I will send her a message, and if she's willing to come to join Mr. Pereira, then we will have a lively discussion on Sunday. So see you, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you on Sunday. Remember, tomorrow at 1 p.m. the video is going to be dropped, so please go there and watch it and leave a comment. Thank you so much for joining. Adios.